Go Premanandi, Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gaunitai ki jai, Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai, Shri Radha Govinda Madhava ki jai, Shri Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai, Lord Holy Name Week ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and all blessed Sri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Some of you are going back to your homelands today. Anyone leaving today?
Oh, leaving the place.
Pardon?
Leaving this place.
You're leaving this place today. You're going somewhere else today. You're going to Paris or somewhere.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Well, thank you all for coming. Safe journey back to wherever you're going. And please come again whenever the appropriate time arises. So I thought this morning we'll read a slightly different part maybe of the Prabhupada Lilamrita. I don't know where you're reading from. As today is September the 21st. So in 1965, which is 60 years ago, on the Gregorian or the Western calendar, Srila Prabhupada, who knows where Srila Prabhupada was 60 years ago on this day, by the Western calendar, also the baby.
Butler, Boston.
Pardon?
Butler.
He was in a small town in Pennsylvania in the United States of America called Butler. Very small town, about 12 to 13,000 population. And it's so coincidentally, I don't know if there's any relevance to that, but last year there was an assassination attempt of the aspiring president of the United States in Butler. They almost got shot. Krishna has his ways. Prophetically, the Prabhupada had just arrived 60 years ago in Butler. This is his first full day, would have been the 21st. He arrived on the morning of the 20th and then spent the rest of the day in Butler. So he's in Butler 21st. I wish it would be the same day. We could have bit more dramatic, but still, it's the pastime. Prabhupada has arrived in America, unbeknown to virtually everyone in the world, aside from his hosts at this point of time. They were a married couple, Gopal and Sally Agarwal. Gopal was from India, and he was an engineer, and he'd met his wife Sally while he was working. She was an American lady. While he was working there in America as an engineer, they met each other and they got betrothed, married. And they were living a very simple life, typical. Well, not so typical. He was the only the only Indian person residing in Butler at the time. There were no other Indians. They were Indians in America. We're talking about Indian Indians, not red Indians from India. Were very few and far between compared to today. In New York, major cities, but in small towns they were almost unheard of. Now they're everywhere. In America. I don't know how many, but many Indian people living in America. But then there weren't so many, and especially in a small town like Butler, which was away from the mainstream, more or less. And it was there that Gopal was living, and it was Gopal who had sponsored Prabhupada's coming to America. He'd written the sponsorship letter at least. So Prabhupada had arrived, as you know, some of you will know that he travelled from India at the age of 70 on board a a ship named Jaladuta, which was owned by a shipping line called the Scindia Steamship Company, which was owned by Samati Maharaji, who was a very pious lady. She was Gujarati. She was a member of the Sri Ballabha Sampradaya. Some of you may be in that Sampradaya, I don't know. At least you know Indian friends in Gujarat who will be in that Sampradaya. They worship named Bushti Marga. They worship Krishna in a form of parental affection. Baby Krishna, love. Lal Gopal, Ladu Gopal, they worship baby Krishna primarily. They're all devotees of Krishna. Bona fide Sampradaya. And she was in that Sampradaya, so she was very favourable to Prabhupada's endeavours. Had been helping a little bit with Srila Prabhupada's publications of his Bhagavatams in India. And so Prabhupada approached her when he got this sponsorship letter from Gopal Agarwal, who actually, on the request of his father, Gopal's father, Prabhupada had met Gopal's father in one program he went to, and somewhat of a casual acquaintance. And this Mr. Agarwal in India had said, "Oh, I will try to sponsor your trip to the West, Swamiji. My son is working there, I'll ask him to sponsor you." But Prabhupada never thought anything more of it, and one day he received a message from Delhi that indeed there was a sponsorship letter out of the blue. Prabhupada had no idea at first how this is possible, then he found out, of course. Then he endeavoured to get a ride, and he had no money, and he approached Samati Maharaji, appealed to her for the facility, and she, under great, you could say, pressure by Prabhupada, she was not at all enthusiastic about this idea of him going to the West for obvious reasons. Not just, it wasn't a financial consideration, it was a health consideration. It was, Swamiji, don't waste your time. People in the West, they're not interested in Krishna consciousness. They all eat meat, they all drink and smoke, gamble, they don't follow any of our principles. It's a totally different culture. You will not be able to have any impression that she was trying to dissuade him from his journey. Even the secretary, Mr. Choksi, she had a secretary, of course, she's a big lady, she's managing this big steamship company, so her secretary was also trying to dissuade Prabhupada from going. Prabhupada was totally insistent, and then she agreed to send him on one of her ships, provided he got the passport and other clearances from the government of India, of course, and a visa, of course, for America also. So that was two things. Next thing was to get a passport. Prabhupada managed to get a passport with help from friends and so on. And the next thing was a visa, to get a visa for America with a sponsorship from somebody in America. He had no backing as such in India, but he managed to get the visa for America. And then the biggest hurdle was something called the P form, which was a clearance from the State Bank of India allowing an Indian citizen to leave India on some trip of business or otherwise, in this case just social visit. And that was the greatest hurdle actually, because he had no money, and generally speaking the State Bank of India would not give a P form very easily at the best of times, and especially to someone who had no money, who had no bank account, who had no business, who was not supported by an association, and who was sponsored by a private person in America. So all the odds were against him to get this final clearance, which was required. But Prabhupada, great insistence and faith and dedication to the order of his spiritual master, is convinced that this is one of the, you could say, hallmarks of a complete surrender. So we see the same, absolute resolve, the intensive resolve of the pure devotee to please Krishna, to serve Krishna. They never give up. It's like Prabhupada's spiritual master, how Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj approached Gorkishore Das Babaji for initiation. Total resolve, determination. He was, I'll give up my life if you will not give me initiation. He saw no point in life without the mercy of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada, he had this tremendous resolve to play this part on behalf of his spiritual master, to fulfill or be a part of the fulfillment of Lord Chaitanya's orders and his predictions. The holy name was spread everywhere. So eventually Prabhupada was able to embark upon that boat at Jaladuta in Calcutta on August the 13th, 1965, and the boat set sail for America. It was destined for New York. Via Colombo and Kochi in Kerala, and there in Kochi, his 200 sets of his early publication of Srimad Bhagavatam were loaded on board. There was only 3 volumes in those days, first canto only, together with some little brochures, India's message of peace and goodwill, which actually Mr. Chokshi had arranged the publication of, which were also loaded on board, which explained about the Srimad Bhagavatam as well as the Sikshastakam prayers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada thus was on board the ship headed for New York. He had 2 heart attacks in the Arabian Sea. The water was very choppy. He got very sick and he thought he was going to die. He didn't think he would survive those. He didn't eat for 8 days. And there was no entry in his diary. He was keeping a diary. He couldn't enter anything in his diary. He was so sick. So that was Prabhupada. And then we have to understand that literally, I mean, obviously a few people in India, 1 or 2 persons plus a few of his relatives, some of them knew he was on board this boat. They had no idea what he was really up to. Nobody could have imagined what was to happen. A 70-year-old Indian sadhu with no real record of particular influence, so to speak, in India, no association, no money, not in good health, going to a foreign land with no knowing anyone there. There was nobody there to receive him per se, indirectly. Nobody there was like, come Swamiji, come. There was nothing like that. He arrived with nothing, basically. He arrived with absolute faith in the order of his spiritual master and the holy name, Mr. Devi Prabhupada. One of us is the implicit faith in the spiritual master and in Krishna, or the holy name. Everything is revealed. So he had that faith that this was what he had to do. The result, as you'll hear, you may have heard, when he arrived, he wrote 1 poem called Markandeya Bhagavat Dharma, which revealed his total dependence on Krishna and his relationship with Krishna as his instrument. Do as you wish with me. That's another topic, not altogether, but a big topic in itself. So on the journey, he managed to survive the Arabian Sea. He started to cook for himself. The captain assisted him in that regard. The rest of the journey, after entering the Suez, the Red Sea, or whatever it's called, with the Suez Canal, then into the Mediterranean, into the Atlantic, was quite smooth. The ocean was smooth. And Prabhupada, from there on, his health improved. And on the way there, he wrote the poem Prayer for the Lotus Feet, which is another beautiful poem, Bengali, translated into English. And then when he reached in Boston on 17th of September 1965, clearance of his visa and everything was done. And he had a little tour of Boston. The port area of Boston is pretty run down. And then he wrote that famous poem, Markandeya Bhagavat Dharma, which really encapsulates the whole principle. I mean, everyone has their different relationships and their different inspirations in Krishna consciousness. But for me, that poem is probably one of the most inspirational pieces of literature which Srila Prabhupada revealed to the world. And in one sense, we could look at it from a deeper level as being the constitution of this movement, because it's the actual secret, the secret of the spreading of Krishna consciousness is to be found in that poem of Srila Prabhupada. Complete, like helpless dependence upon the Lord. Do as you wish with me, make me dance if you wish. I have no qualifications whatsoever. Prabhupada was really showing his, helpless in one sense situation, but completely dependent upon Krishna and depending upon the mercy of his Guru Maharaj, and willing to take this tremendous risk and this tremendous challenge, which nobody in the world was aware of what was really going on. In that even Prabhupada's godbrothers were not very enthusiastic, to say the least, or encouraging in his endeavour, in general at least, not all, but generally speaking. And certainly no one in America had any inkling of idea what was going on. It didn't go in the newspapers or anything like that. It was an unknown event to the world in general, but it was the most significant event practically to take place in a century, if not in history. Very significant event. Some of Prabhupada's godbrothers have been sent to Europe at their impression. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj in 1932 or 3 or whatever it was, sent some of his disciples to Europe, to London. They went to Berlin, I think they came to Paris also, and Prague actually, came to Prague, our home country, for some programs there, maybe 1 or 2 other places. And they tried to preach, but they preached mostly amongst the intellectual, the intelligentsia, whatever it is, and they really didn't make much impression. Some meetings were there, official meetings. They partially compromised their dress and different things like that to try to fit in a little bit, but they hardly established very much. A few sort of disciples were made, but they weren't exactly pioneering types. They were kind of pretty laid back disciples in general. Well, Prabhupada, nothing much had happened since then either, since the 30s. Prabhupada thought, let me try at least. One of the books, which is a beautiful series of books by Shyamasundara Prabhu, is called Chasing the Rhinos. You may have seen these books. You've seen them, Vishnu Jan, Chasing the Rhinos. You'd like to read those. They're really good. Try to read them. They're good, huh? They're really amazing. How many of you have read Chasing the Rhinos? There's 3 of you. If you can, I know you're busy, most of you are grihastas or whatever, married, working, or whatever. But if you get time, please read them. It really takes you very much into the spirit. You can read the philosophy, you can read the history, but the spirit, the mood of Srila Prabhupada, they're a living example of Prabhupada's relationships and his mission and mood, very special. And they're called Chasing Rhinos. And this is a term which Prabhupada would use from time to time, or shooting rhinos. Try to shoot a rhino. Nobody expects you to be able to shoot a rhino, so no one will. You're not going to get criticized if you don't make it, and if you do, everyone's amazed. So Prabhupada said, well, they tried in Europe and they didn't make it, so let me go somewhere else, and then, no one's going to, you're not going to no one's going to expect you're going to succeed there. And if you do, then it's a great victory, But either way, devotional service is a victory. We don't depend upon the results. Devotional service is not a business. It is the constitution of the spirit soul. We're meant to always be engaged in devotional service to Krishna or to Krishna's devotees. That's the reason we exist primarily. We're not here to enjoy ourselves as such, separately from Krishna. So Prabhupada he wasn't depending on the results as such, or the endeavours. He's not the enjoyer of the results of his work. So Prabhupada came to America with this mood, mission, also, which was not known to others, although his mission wasn't black and white at that time. His mission was to preach the message of Lord Chaitanya in the English language as best he could. And he was convinced that the vehicle, or let's say the means of distributing books, was the primary way that this would be achieved. That's why he brought these books with him. His spiritual master had impressed this upon him, the importance of book distribution and publishing books and distributing books. So that was Prabhupada's main weapon, if you want to call it that, the holy name, and Srimad Bhagavatam. When he came to America, he had great faith in those two forms of the Lord, that they would be digestible or possible to impregnate into the hearts of the people in the West. At least he would try. So he arrived there in Boston, and on the 18th he compiled Markandeya Bhagavat Dharma. The evening of the 18th, the ship set sail from Boston to New York. Overnight journey. And it's interesting, I checked on the Vedic calendar, on 1965, on the Vedic calendar was exactly the same day. You've got to see the equivalence on the two calendars, a little complicated to explain. But it was exactly the same day that they say that the Twin Towers came down in New York, and that the airplanes flew from Boston to New York, so they say, knocked down the Twin Towers. Was the very same day that Prabhupada went from Boston to New York, 36 years to the day earlier, not on the Western calendar, but on the Vedic calendar. Something prophetic there. Prabhupada came with a very wonderful, loving, blissful message, which would also change the culture in a sense. No, I don't mean necessarily with external idea of culture, but when we talk of culture, we're not necessarily talking about externals here, we're talking of internals. It's a culture, it's to cultivate our relationship with Krishna, which replaces the Western culture, which is based entirely on sense gratification. Totally on sense gratification. How to achieve material progress, economic and sensual, etc. So that's the Western culture. The Eastern culture was, to some degree still is, based upon spiritual principles, objectives. So the replacement of material objectives with spiritual objectives, that's the cultural change. The externals are secondary. If they facilitate that, then they're of value. If they don't, they're of no value. It's not an external thing that Prabhupada was bringing, another dogmatic, somewhat pseudo-religious process or something. No, but the actual nature of the soul to help us to reveal or to realize our actual nature. So no one had a clue that that was Prabhupada's mission. This cultural revolution, as Prabhupada said. It's mainly aimed because the goal is different. So then he went to New York. He arrived there on the 19th in the morning. He spent some of the day there arranging for his return ticket with the steamship company office in New York. He was met at the port, the Jaladuta docked in Brooklyn Pier, one of the piers there. He was met with a representative of some company called Traveller's Aid. This man from Traveller's Aid had been sent by Gopal Agarwal to New York to meet Prabhupada when he got off the boat. Prabhupada said when he walked down the gangplank, he said, I didn't know whether to turn right or left. He had no idea. You're a massive city, skyscrapers everywhere to be seen in all directions practically. And just quite daunting experience. Completely different scenario to Calcutta. And Prabhupada stepped off the boat and he said, I don't know whether to turn left or right. Luckily this Traveller's Aid man was there, and he was there to take Prabhupada to the office of Scindia steamship, and then on to, they'd arranged a bus for Prabhupada. There's one famous, and there's the busiest bus station in the world, I believe, at least it was, Port Authority bus station. So many stands, it's like amazing. Buses going everywhere, all over America. And so he caught a bus there, overnight bus again on the 19th, arriving on the 20th in the morning in Pittsburgh. Some of you have heard of Pittsburgh. How many of you have been to Pittsburgh? Goswami probably has been to Pittsburgh. Anybody else? I went there once. On our way to New Vrindavan. It's not too far from New Vrindavan, the first farm community in ISKCON. It's funny, the bus on the way went past Harrisburg, and if you know, there's another smaller town called Harrisburg, about halfway between New York and Pittsburgh. And near Harrisburg is another farm, ISKCON farm, Gita Nagari, very close to there. So on the route, I don't know, you can't say that, but those two famous farms, the two most famous farms probably in ISKCON in America, probably. And they were both on that route that Prabhupada took. And then at Pittsburgh, he arrived there in the early hours of the morning. It was quite a long journey, maybe 8 hours bus ride overnight. And that isn't, if you've ever been on a bus overnight, that's also not very comfortable, generally speaking, especially when you get old, difficult to sleep. And, you know, what can you say, cramped up in a bus for 8 hours. And Prabhupada was focused. When we have our focus, we can undergo any kind of austerity. And when we don't have a focus, it's very difficult to carry on. We sometimes lose sight of the goal. I remember I was in a metro underground, I call it in London. Some of you are from London. So in the underground there was a big billboard, you know, any station, sometimes we stood on a platform on the other side of the train line, there's a billboard advertising something, whatever. But this wasn't so much of an advertisement, it was a message, I guess. I don't know who put it there. I can't remember, it didn't seem to have an indication as to who or what the purpose of it was, besides a good message. The message said very nicely, it said, obstacles are things you see when you lose sight of the goal. I thought it was quite a profound message. And they gave a very nice illustration. I guess we've all been to the ocean shore at some point of our lives, to the beach. And not usually, but in some beaches, in England too, some beaches there where they have, in the bay, just off the coast, they'll have some rocks sticking up, you know, jagged rocks. Sometimes they have arches in them, you know. If you ever seen that, it's quite nice. Looks nice. Anyway. They're very dangerous because when the tide, sometimes when the tide goes up, the boats can't see them. They go underwater. And then if the boat hits it, you're finished. It just rips the boat, bottom of the boat to pieces. Very heavy, jagged rocks. You know. So, and it was a nice picture that someone had taken in the morning, dawn, of the sun rising. And the sun was right in the middle of one of these arches. You could see the sun, and then all around these jagged rocks were there. It said, obstacles are things you see when you lose sight of the goal. So as soon as you take your eyes off the sun, you see nothing but obstacles. Isn't it? Dangerous obstacles. So this world is like that. As soon as we take our consciousness off of our goal, what is our goal? What is our goal? What's our goal? Do we have a goal? Pardon?
Krishna Prema.
Krishna Prema. Yeah, and of course we know there's a path to Krishna Prema. Our goal is to Krishna. Our goal is Krishna, to please Krishna, to serve Krishna, to develop love of Krishna. That's our goal. As soon as you take your mind off that, everything we're doing is for that in mind. Then easily we see obstacles. Somebody's in my way, someone's giving me a hard time, my mind, this thing, that thing, why are they treating me like this? I'm getting nowhere here, I could be enjoying myself, I'm wasting my life 50 years, I haven't got a penny to show for it, you know, and then they kick me out, you know, it's like, whatever it is. So many things can come along if we forget our goal. if we forget that nothing is happening by chance, that Krishna isn't, basically speaking, everything arranges in our life and happens in our life is the hand of the Lord working. Right? His hand is working. He wants us to go back to God more than we do. And he makes arrangements. Some of them appear to us conditioned vision as being very not so comfortable, not so welcome. Certainly if we think about Srila Prabhupada's journey to the West, it is a complete example of so many challenges, but he fixed his heart and mind on the goal, fully on the goal. Didn't go to America. Mr. Chokshi, he quipped at Prabhupada, he said, Swamiji, I know why you want to go to America. You want to go there for sense gratification, he said. Perhaps though, don't talk such nonsense. He just chastised him like anything. He was kind of joking, but you know how it is. He sometimes joke. And he didn't go there for education. Most Indians were going there for education or some work. He didn't go there to work per se. He didn't go there for education. He didn't go there for sightseeing or something else. You want to go there for sightseeing? You want to go and see the Statue of Liberty? No. Empire State Building? No. No, Prabhupada wasn't worried about those things. He would sometimes check them out just to see what, made the Americans kind of, tick, or what kind of like move, or what captured their attention. He would sometimes check these things out, but he had no interest himself. So after arriving in Butler early in the morning, we're going to now start September the 20th. Butler, Pennsylvania, home of the Jeep. And the Army Jeep in 1941 or 2 or something was made there. American Army Jeep. It's an army vehicle, small army vehicle that carried the troops. And it read a granite plaque in the city park. Butler, famous as the town, U.S. Army Jeep, was invented in 1940, was an industrial city. Population has gone down. I looked up the population, but there was 12,000 something now. It says 20,000 then, but it's less now. Mostly small towns, they lose their population. They all go to the big ones. It was settled amid the hills of an era rich in oil, coal, gas and limestone. Its industry consisted mainly of factories for plate, glass, railroad cars, refrigerators, oil equipment and rubber goods. Quite an industrial place, as you can imagine. Pittsburgh also is a very industrial city. The very word Pittsburgh, you can get an impression there of what that would be. Burgh is the area, borough, like a borough. Pits, coal mines, the coal pits, steel and coal, very predominant there, very industrial area. Not a very pleasant area from the material point of view. 90% of the local labourers were Native Americans, whatever a Native American is. Well, you would think, yeah, the natives, but I don't think that's what he's referring to here. We call them natives, but the British and the Europeans who went there, they are natives in that sense, of course. They're not exactly the original Native Americans, to say the least, but they became known like that. The nominal religion had always been Christian, mostly Protestant and some Catholic, and in later years a few synagogues had appeared. But there was no Hindu community at that time. As he had a Volkswagen station van, old Volkswagen vans. We used to have them on Sankirtana. I don't know about here in France, but they were very common. It's kind of like a 9-seater or something van, and we converted them. What happened? They were already converted into more carrier van. So anyway, we had one of these vans. Pulled into town. The pre-dawn air was warm and humid. He met Prabhupada at the bus stand. drove him the short distance back to his maybe an hour drive or something to Butler. So then he arrived. The air was warm and humid, a bit like we have here at the moment. It's warm and humid, isn't it? A bit cooler today. Yesterday was warmer and humid. Arrived there in their home. The morning edition of Butler Eagle, that's the name of the local newspaper. Even small towns had their own newspapers in those days. Every small town had their own newspaper, as well as national newspapers, as well as regional newspapers. There'd be 3, 4, 5, 6 newspapers a day available in everywhere. Well, you could get more if you go to other parts, but in that one town, and most people would buy all of them. By all the different newspapers, that was like that. The daily, study, reading the newspaper every day was a highlight for many people. The Butler Eagle. And what was in the Butler Eagle? The headlines. Red Chinese fire on India. Prime Minister Shastri declares Chinese communists out to dominate the world. United Nations Council demands Pakistan and India ceasefire in 48 hours. In America, even news of India was, at that moment anyway, was quite prominent amongst the headlines. Srila Prabhupada arrived at the Agarwal's home, and there was a block of apartments called Sterling Apartments. 4 o'clock in the morning. And Gopal invited him to sleep on the couch. They had a small apartment. Their place, the townhouse apartment, consisted of a small living room, a dining room, a kitchenette, 2 upstairs bedrooms and a bath. Here they lived with their 2 young children. The Agarwals had lived in Butler for a few years and felt themselves established in a good social circle. Since their apartment had so little space, they decided it would be better if the Swami took a room at the YMCA. You know what the YMCA is? Do they still have YMCAs? They're still around. And what does it stand for?
Young Men's Christian Association.
Very good. Young Men's Christians Association. But it became more like a youth hostel in one sense. It was, people would stay there for short or long term at a cheap price. So they thought it'd be better they stay there, and that he come to visit them during the day. That was the idea. Of course, living space wasn't the real difficulty. It was him. I mean, he did have only had 2 rooms to live in. Still, the main challenge was him. He was a bit of a misfit in this little conservative industrial town in America. A strange-looking character, to say the least. Imagine having someone like that in your home in a situation like this, if you were nothing to do with India or Hare Krishna or some just ordinary American couple. They weren't exactly ordinary American, he was Indian, but they were living like that. And everyone around them was like that. How would he fit into the Butler atmosphere? He was their guest, so they would have to explain him to their friends and neighbours, Quite an ordeal. Everybody would be curious. What on earth is this? Srila Prabhupada was immediately a curiosity for whoever saw him. And even when I first put on this dress, wherever you go, everybody would look at you. They don't look at you at all now. They don't care less. You could walk down the street with beer barrel on. Nobody would even look at you. People don't care a damn about dress now. In those days, they really cared about dress. If you weren't dressed in the normal way, you were weird. I mean, the hippies had just starting at this time. That was really weird. I mean, a man with long hair was like, what is this? They would look at you like you were crazy. Even if you had bell-bottom jeans or something, that was weird, Very weird t-shirt and jeans, weird. People dressed differently. It was like everybody was more or less like that. So what to speak of someone dressed like a Swami? And in Butler, maybe in New York they didn't care much, but in these rural towns it was a big issue. How he would fit in. Srila Prabhupada was immediately a curiosity for whoever saw him in anxiety. Mrs. Agarwal decided that instead of having people speculate about the strange man in orange robes living at her house, it would be better to let them know about him from the newspapers. Because everyone read the newspapers, so they already know. She explained her plan to Prabhupada, who laughed, understanding he didn't fit in. Sally hurried off to a Pittsburgh newspaper office, but the interviewer was not able to comprehend why the person should make an interesting story. Sally then took him to the local Butler Eagle. She took Prabhupada with him, where his presence was accepted as indeed newsworthy. They printed a small news article in the Butler Eagle. Oh, that's one thing which previous to this, yes, I just mentioned. Prabhupada had written a letter to the Sally and Gopal Agarwal, and when it was posted, I don't say, but it was sometime, maybe when he left Calcutta or maybe on the way, put it in a post office somewhere, where it was put in the post. But this letter from Prabhupada arrived at the Agarwal's house in Butler about a week before he arrived. So Prabhupada's journey on the boat, I think, was about 5 weeks, more or less, 35 days or 6 days, something like that. And so sometime the letter was sent, and it arrived about a week. And when they, and so Sally Agarwal opened it, the letter, and then in alarm she called to her husband, "Oh, honey, sit down, listen to this. The Swami is coming." They didn't know he was coming up to that moment of time, you know, because his father had sponsored many an Indian Swami or somebody, or asked his son to sponsor them on several occasions before, but nobody ever came, so they never thought anything would come of this one either. But then she said, "Oh my God, the Swami is coming." You know, we had a similar thing, not in the same mood, but Prabhupada is coming. And it was always like, "Oh my God, Prabhupada's coming in 3 days." We generally only got a few days' notice when Prabhupada was coming. It wasn't like, you know, planned like 6, sometimes, but then that was usually changed anyway. And quite often you got like 1 to 3 days' notice that Prabhupada was coming. And usually it was very vague as to exactly when he was coming. There were no mobiles, even phones, telex. The telex wasn't even there, it was telegram. It wasn't done by phone or internet or WhatsApp or anything like that. It wasn't there. Oh, the Swami is coming. Srila Prabhupada enclosed his pictures so they would not mistake him. The Agarwals had looked curiously at the photographs. There will be no mistake there, Gopal. Imagine. No one in all of America looked like this. You know, nobody. Everyone, all the Indian people were dressed normally like yourself, but not with the robes. Nobody. You know, the Swamis who've gone there were generally dressed in Western clothes. Once they stayed there, at least. Srila Prabhupada was immediately at that. So here's the article. A feature article appeared in the Butler Eagle, and it said, "In fluent English, devotee of Hindu cult explains commission to visit the West." A photograph had come to the Agarwal's apartment. A photographer, rather, had come to the Agarwal's apartment and had taken a picture of Srila Prabhupada standing in the living room, holding an open volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. I guess this is the first picture of Prabhupada in the West. I guess. We haven't heard of any others, at least not up to this point. And that picture is this one here. You can't see it very well, but it's this one up here. Prabhupada holding the Bhagavatam. You can see it? Yeah, another wallpaper in the background, kind of scribbly old wallpaper there. And that's the first picture in the west of Prabhupada photograph. Yeah. The caption read, Ambassador of Bhakti Yoga. Nice caption. The article began, a slight brown man in faded orange drapes and wearing white bathing shoes stepped out of a compact car yesterday and into the Butler YMCA to attend a meeting. He is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swamiji, a messenger from India to the peoples of the West. The article referred to Srimad Bhagavatam as biblical literature and to Srila Prabhupada as the learned teacher. It continued. This is referring to Prabhupada speaking, I think, to the interviewer. My mission is to revive a people's God consciousness. Simple. So this is Prabhupada's mission, to revive people's God consciousness. Everything is contained within that one sentence, isn't it? Says the Swamiji, God is the Father of all living beings in thousands of different forms. He explains, human life is a stage of perfection in evolution. If we miss the message, back we go through the process again, he believes. Bhaktivedanta lives as a monk and permits no women to touch his food. Oh, a little extreme, they didn't quite get it all quite right. On a 6-week ocean voyage and at the Agrawal apartment in Butler, he prepares his meals in a brass pan with separate levels for steaming rice, vegetables and making bread at the same time. He is a strict vegetarian and is permitted to drink only milk. The miracle food for babies and old men, he noted. If Americans would give more attention to their spiritual life, they would be much happier, he says. This is some article which appeared in the newspaper, so not bad. The Agrawals had their own opinion as to why Prabhupada had come to America. They thought he came simply to finance his books and nothing more. Of course, again, it would be difficult to understand how that would be possible in no kind of connections in America at all. Maybe that would be an idea, but not a very easy one to fulfill. They were sure that he was hoping only to meet someone who could help him with the publication of his Srimad Bhagavatam, and that he did not want any followers. Well, Prabhupada did start, in a sense, you may know, when he went to New York, he started what's called uptown Manhattan, where a little bit more upper class and people who are quite well-to-do, and his first audience were mostly elderly, well-to-do American ladies, but they were only interested in kind of very theosophical or, not spiritual, not devotional for sure. The kind of the idea of some kind of, something very kind of like romantic kind of philosophy of some kind. But they weren't really interested in practicing very much. And those were his first audience, but that didn't work out, and then he had nowhere to go, and he ended up unbeknown in one sense, although Krishna arranged everything, no doubt. Unbeknown, he ended up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where waves of hippies have suddenly started to descend in that area and just plunking themselves in various cheap apartments all over the place. There were tens of thousands that were hanging out. It was like a little haven for these young, disenchanted youth who were anti-establishment, basically, searching for some purpose of life. So that was Krishna's arrangement. So he then, so in other words, Krishna's mercy, Prabhupada preached in that area, and many of them became inclined and took up Krishna consciousness. The Agarwals had their own opinion. At least they hoped he wouldn't do anything to attract attention. If he was in there. But at least that would be a bit too embarrassing for them. Like going out on the street and chanting Hare Krishna or something along the main street of Butler. That would be too much, Bringing back some street guy or something, to their home. Things that devotees sometimes do. At least they hoped he would. And they felt that this was his mentality also. Sadi Agarwal said he didn't create any waves. He didn't want any crowd. He didn't want anything. He only wanted to finance his books. Perhaps Prabhupada, seeing their nervousness, agreed to keep a low profile out of consideration for his hosts. In one sense, Prabhupada in Boston was testing the water. What is it like? He was looking around at the people, what was going on, what they liked to do, trying to grasp the nature of the culture to see how to present Krishna consciousness in that culture. At Prabhupada's request, however, Mr. Agarwal held a kind of open house in his apartment every night from 6 to 9. Sally Agarwal, it was quite an intellectual group that we were in, and they were fascinated by him. They hardly knew what to ask him. They didn't know enough. This was just like a dream out of a book. If all the families in America was one couple in this insignificant, more or less, little town, and one Swami alone in America staying in their house or coming to their house daily, it's kind of, you'd never dream of it. Unbelievable. Who would expect to meet a Swami in someone's living room in Butler, Pennsylvania? It was just really tremendous. In the middle of middle-class America, my parents came from quite a distance to see him. His parents. We knew a lot of people in Pittsburgh and they came up. This was a very unusual thing, having him here. But the real interest shown in him was only as a curiosity. He had a typewriter, which was one of his few possessions, and an umbrella. That was one of the things that caused a sensation, that he always carried an umbrella. And it was a little chilly, and he was boarding. So he always wore this hat that someone had made for him, like a swimming cap. We call them Swami hats, Don't see them much nowadays in ISKCON, it's rare. Padmanabha Prabhu gave me one a couple of years ago. He's in the back there, I've still got it. He gave me one of these hats, these Swami hats. It's like a cap, like holding the head, and it's got these down here over the ears, and you button it up underneath the chin. A Swami cap. Prabhupada brought that with him from India. That fascinated them. And he was so brilliant that when he saw someone twice, he knew who they were. He remembered. He was a brilliant man. Or if he met them in our apartment and saw them in a car, he would remember their name and he would wave and say their name. He was a brilliant man. All the people liked him. They were amazed at how intelligent he was. The thing that got them was the way he remembered their name and his humorous way. He looked so serious all the time, but he was a very humorous person. He was forbidding in his looks, but he was very charming. He was the easiest guest I have had in my life, because when I couldn't spend time with him, he chanted. And I knew he was perfectly happy. When I couldn't talk to him, he chanted. It was so easy though, because I knew he was never bored. I never felt any pressure or tension about having him. He was so easy that when I had to take care of the children, he would just chant. It was so great. When I had to do things, he would just be happy chanting. He was a very good guest. When the people would come, they were always smoking cigarettes, But he would say, pay no attention, think nothing of it. That's what he said, think nothing of it. Because he knew we were different. I didn't smoke in front of him. I knew I wasn't supposed to smoke in front of Gopal's father, so I sort of considered him the same. He didn't make any problems for anybody. One evening a guest asked Prabhupada, what do you think of Jesus Christ? Prabhupada replied, he is the Son of God. Then he added that he, the guest, was also a son of God. Everyone was interested to hear that the Swami accepted Jesus Christ as a Son of God. Gopal, his intent was not to have you change your way of life. He wasn't telling anybody they should be vegetarian or anything. All he wanted you to do was to follow what you are, but be better. He didn't stress that we should give up many things. Srila Prabhupada followed a regulated daily schedule. Every morning he would walk the 6 to 7 blocks from the YMCA to Sterling Apartments, arriving there about 7 in the morning. I have a picture of those apartments. They're not very attractive looking. They're kind of cheap apartments. When he had first landed in New York, he had in his luggage a large bundle of dried cereal, similar to rolled oats. This supply was enough for several weeks, and every morning at breakfast he would take some with his milk. At 7:45 Gopal would leave for work, and around 9:30 Prabhupada would start preparing his lunch in the kitchen. He made his chapatis by hand without even a rolling pin. He worked alone for 2 hours while Mrs. Agarwal did housework and took care of her children. They were young. The boy was only a few months old and the girl was about 2 or 3. At 11:30 he took prasadam. Sally, when he cooked he used only one burner. The bottom level pot created a steam. He had the dal on the bottom, and it created a steam to cook many other vegetables. So for about a week, he was cooking this great big lunch, which was ready about 11:30. And Gopal always came home for lunch from about 12. I used to serve Gopal a sandwich, and then he would go back to work. But it didn't take me long to realize that the food the Swami was cooking, we'd enjoy it too. So he started cooking that new meal for all of us. Oh, and so much we enjoyed it. Our fun was to show him what we knew of America. And he had never seen such things. It was such fun to take him to the supermarket. He loved opening the packages of okra or frozen beans. And he didn't have to clean them and cut them and do all those things. Terrible things. I've heard some people have to grow vegetables. I don't know if you know that. Not everyone can buy them, and we don't need to do that. We can go to the local supermarket. They grow in the supermarket all nice and clean, right, in packages. But some people, dirty job. They have to, grow them in the ground. Get their hands dirty and cold and wet and muddy and horrible. To go to the supermarket. Buy a nice packet of frozen beans, Don't waste your time growing things. That's the mentality, isn't it? Most of us. Even if you have the opportunities. You don't have to clean them either, they're already nice and cleaned. Terrible doesn't have to peel a potato. Dirty, muddy potato. Yuck. Some cauliflower, got some worms crawling around in it. Really, horrible. And, The Prabhupada was just fascinated to see how the people were, This is fun. He liked to see those things. He opened the freezer every day and just chose his items. It was fun to watch him. He sat on the couch while I swept with a vacuum cleaner, and he was so interested in that. Never seen a vacuum cleaner before. People used to use brushes and things to clean the floor. Everything's different. And Same thing, most of the food was frozen. I don't know about now. But, the vegetables would be in the freezer, frozen potatoes, frozen this, frozen that. But much as we know, encourage this, but in those days, at that time, it looked like he was using frozen vegetables, doing the needful. It was fun. He was so interesting. So every day we'd have this big feast, and everything was great fun. We really enjoyed it. I would help him cut things. He would spice it, and we would laugh. He was the most enjoyable man. I really felt like a sort of daughter to him, even in such a short time, like he was my father-in-law. He was a friend of my father-in-law, but I really felt close to him. He enjoyed everything. I liked him. I thought he was tremendous. After lunch, Prabhupada would leave around 1 p.m. and walk to the YMCA, where the Agarwals figured he must have worked on his writing until 5. He would come back to the apartment about 6 in the evening after they had taken their meal. They ate meat. So Mrs. Agarwal was careful to have it cleared away before he came. When one night he came early, she said, "Oh, Swamiji, you just cooked meat. The smell will be very disagreeable to you." But he said, "Oh no, don't think anything of it. Think nothing of it." In the evening he would speak with guests. Prabhupada was tolerating all these things for the sake of his mission, keeping the goal in mind. The guests would usually take coffee and other refreshments, but he would request a glass of warm milk at 9 o'clock. He would stay speaking until 9:30 or 10, and then Mrs. Agarwal would drive him back to the YMCA. Prabhupada would also do his own laundry every day. He washed his clothes in the Agarwal's bathroom and hung them to dry outside. Mrs. Agarwal's interview on this says a little bit differently. She said, yes, he washed them in the bathroom, but they had to ask him to stop because the water was going all over the floor. And you don't do that in America, in the West, going through the floorboards, mess everywhere, soapy water everywhere. In India, you do like that, you don't care, you either got it's like one bathroom is all stone, or you're doing it outside, In America, they don't do that sort of thing. Wash their laundry in the sink, basically. And then he would take them out and he would lay them flat. If you see in India many times, they lay their clothes flat on the grass. He would lay them out flat on the grass, He wasn't used to just hanging them on lines business, Maybe he was, but that's what he was doing anyway. Yes. He sometimes accompanied the Agarwals to the laundromat and was interested to see how Americans washed and dried their clothes. To Sally, he seemed very interested in the American ways and people. Sally, our boy Bridge, was 6 or 7 months old when the Swami came, and the Indians love boys. The Swami liked Bridge. He was there when Bridge first stood. The first time Bridge made the attempt and actually succeeded, the Swami stood up and clapped. It was a celebration. Another time our baby teased on the Swami's shoes. Babies sometimes teeth are coming, they like to bite things and chew, like chew on the gums, itching. And he picked up what he got Prabhupada's shoe and chewing Prabhupada's shoe. Oh, they've been all those shoes, she thought. They've been all over India and my kid is chewing on them. You know how a mother would feel. There's a picture of Bridge when he first started walking. I think it should be in here, Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, there it is. Small picture. Here's Prabhupada cooking in the kitchen of the Agarwals, and there's Prabhupada with Bridge. I can't see it from the back, no doubt, but Prabhupada looks so elated. I mean, he looks like so excited, doesn't he? Prabhupada smiles. He looks like this. The boy has conquered the universe, It's like his first time he stood up on his own 2 feet. Prabhupada holding almost every night, he used to sit in the next door neighbour's backyard. We sat out there sometimes with him, or we stayed in the living room. One time something happened with our little girl, Pamela, who was only 3 years old. I used to take her to Sunday school, and she learned about Jesus in Sunday school. Then when she would see Swamiji with his robes on and everything, she called him Swami Jesus. And this one time, when it first dawned on us what she was saying, she called him Swami Jesus. And Swami smiled and said, "And a little child shall lead them." It was so funny. Prabhupada spoke to various groups in the community. He spoke at the Lions Club in early October and received a formal document. I got a picture. I went back in the archives and got a picture of what the Lions Club isn't there anymore, but where it was then, a picture of that building where Prabhupada spoke. They moved a few times since then. Be it known that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami was a guest at the Lions Club of Butler, Pennsylvania, and as an expression of appreciation of the services rendered, the club tenders this acknowledgement. He also gave a talk at the Y, not sure what the Y is, and at St. Fidelis Seminary College in Herman, Pennsylvania, and he spoke regularly to guests at the Agua home. Herman is just outside Butler. It was a very big seminary, Christian seminary. He gave a talk in the local church, or some local church, Uniting Church. He gave talks in different places, in and around Butler, whilst he was there. Arranged mostly by Sally Agarwal. She was doing amazing service, Sally. She was very, very favourable to Srila Prabhupada. I mean, even to her last days, she would always be there with the devotees whenever they call her or visit her, talk and support in various ways. And she, more than her husband, practically, she became inclined towards Prabhupada. When he went after the end of there's another one here, Prabhupada went to a university town called Slippery Rock, not far from Butler, where he lives at today. But basically after a month he left Butler and went to New York. When he was in New York, there were several letters to Prabhupada, to Sally Agarwal, asking her if she could come to New York. He would look at a building and think this would make a nice temple. And downstairs we can have a restaurant. Now, he would write to Sally Agarwal asking if she would like to come and establish a restaurant there. Organize. Didn't happen, of course. Prabhupada was trying everything, thinking how to establish something in New York. And that went on for almost a year before anything happened. A significant happening, which was only a small storefront. Yeah, we're heading off tomorrow to New York, so we wish you all the very best. Hare Krishna. Remember, it's nice to remember Srila Prabhupada's whereabouts, in our journey, in our days, when we remember. There are other things that took place on September the 21st, but we'll leave it today, we'll be late. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. We did a day-by-day one on the Vedic calendar last week. That's why my memory's a little fresh. So, anyone want to go out now to a far distant place and start on your own with no money and start a center somewhere? Where in the world do we have no center? Well, there are many countries in the Middle East.
Antarctica.
Pardon?
Antarctica.
Where?
Iceland of Antarctica.
Antarctic.
Antarctica. Yeah, we don't know. There's no towns in Antarctica. There's some There's some research stations, so there's no time.
There's lots of penguins.
Penguins indeed.
Polar bears, sea lions.
Which country? Is there any decent country where we have no? Africa, there are many countries we have no temples. I don't know about South America. I think they have temples almost everywhere.
Few.
Europe, I guess. There are a few countries we may not have temples.
Luxembourg.
Huh?
Luxembourg.
Well, there are devotees there, more or less just an extension of Belgium, really. Maybe some of the ex-Yugoslavian countries don't have it. I don't know. Maybe they do. Crossover or something. Even in Albania we have devotees. No center. Something. Anyway, Prabhupada's mission spread wide and far now. Far and near. Temples everywhere. Thousands of centers. Hundreds of thousands of devotees. Millions of books distilled. Farms, restaurants, and these things. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi.
Janananda Goswami ki jai.